Hello there friends and welcome. Today we have yet another amazing Expedition 33 build. And now it's finally time for Lune, everyone's favorite mage. Lune is definitely one of the strongest characters in the game. She has amazing, extreme damage potential with very powerful combos that you can achieve as early as Act 1. What this means is you'll easily get to not only one-shot entire enemy packs and also powerful enemies regardless of where you are at in the game, including of course the ability of one-shotting the toughest enemy of the game on expert mode through multiple ways even, because her skills are that good, with even the unique ability of supporting your party by highly increasing the damage of all allies in what's essentially double their damage by making every single thing they do, including Lune herself, chain secondary strikes for maximum damage potential. And as if all that was not enough, Lune can also debuff enemies and even support your party with healing. So without further ado, let us get into our Lune Stormlord one-shot build. First, let us begin with the best skills for Lune as if you had just recruited her at the start. And you absolutely wanna rush for Wildfire first. That takes Thunderfall, you'll never be using it. Then we can pick Wildfire even early. Wildfire will be your most important area of effect spell until around the middle of the second chapter. It deals medium fire damage to all enemies for one hit. The extra burn is amazing for increasing the critical chance of all of your party even early, plus of course dealing more damage to enemies at the start of their turn. After that you wanna go below Thunderfall. First with Electrify, it's a great skill but you'll only be using it later. Then we can finally at long last pick Mayhem. Mayhem will be Lune's best way of dealing loads of damage very early in the game. It deals high elemental damage for each stain Lune currently has, and can also break the enemy if 4 stains are consumed. Ideally, you'll always wanna cast it with 4 stains for the maximum amount of damage. It is a very cheap skill at 3 AP only as well for all the damage it can potentially do. Most importantly, Lune will have access to a very powerful weapon in Act 1, that will apply 1 random elemental stain per free aim shot on the enemy. Which means of course with 4 AP you can fire at the enemy 4 times, then with 3 extra AP cast Mayhem all in the same turn, for a total of 7 AP and loads of potential damage. Mayhem is of course amazing, but we want even more power, so now it's time to pick Elemental Trick. Elemental Trick is one of her best skills as it is the starter key piece of her most powerful combos. It deals low single target, ice, fire, lightning and earth damage for 4 strikes, so 1 strike of each element. The best part is critical hits will generate the corresponding elemental stain. In Expedition 33 you can easily acquire 100% critical chance, even as early as Act 1. And of course I'll provide you with ways of doing that in the how to play section, but essentially, if you have 100% crit chance, then cast Elemental Trick, Lune will now have 1 different elemental stain for each element, which of course means she can then spend it on something else for maximum power. And this is why we are now picking Elemental Genesis, one of Lune's strongest skills and definitely the best one, the earliest. Elemental Genesis will do extreme damage to all enemies for 8 hits, so it's a massive nuke, both single and area of effect. The only limitation is that it can only be cast if you actually have 1 different elemental stain for each element. And well, guess what? That is what our Elemental Trick with 100% critical chance is for. So you cast Elemental Trick, and then on the next turn, or the same turn even if you have an extra turn, you can follow it up with an Elemental Genesis as you obliterate the entire enemy pack, including even bosses. And by the way, this can all be done as early as Act 1 as well, which is part of what makes Lune so powerful. Both Elemental Trick, Mayhem and Genesis are amazing of course, but you have to understand, they do suffer from one major limitation, and that is the fact, if the enemy absorbs 1 element, well, your Elemental Trick will kind of fumble, because you will then not be able to generate all the 4 different elemental stains, which of course means you cannot follow up with an Elemental Genesis, at least not on the same turn. Thankfully most enemies in this game, including story bosses, and even most tough optional enemies don't really absorb fire, earth, lightning or cold. But for those enemies, And as a way of overcoming this limitation, well, this is why now it's time to finally focus into Lune's highly powerful lightning damage skills. The beauty about her lightning skills is that they all have the same property of doubling the amount of initial hits if you get a critical hit. And once again, just like with Elemental Trick, it is very easy to achieve 100% consistent criticals in this game even early. The only true limitation of her lightning skills is that, well, something like Mayhem and Elemental Genesis deals much higher base damage, right? It's extreme damage for Genesis and high damage for Mayhem. Meanwhile, something like Electrify is low damage, the same for, let's say, her Stormcaller skill, which is medium. This is why I'm actually saving her lightning skills for now, because at this point, you'll mostly be around Chapter 2. What this means is, you will be able to start accumulating lots of extra damage bonuses, all of which stack additively in this game. So you will be able to hit the damage cap with even low damage stuff like Electrify, for loads of potential damage. Which also makes these skills that I'll cover now much better than, let's say, Elemental Genesis, at least during Chapter 2 when you are still limited by the damage cap. Anyways, the first one is Electrify, and you already picked that before to access Mayhem. Electrify can deal up to 6 entire hits if you get critical hits, and it's low single target lightning damage. The best part is, the cost is extremely low. It's actually Lune's, well, cheapest skill of them all, only 1 AP. And at this point you will have a weapon that makes it cost 0, so essentially nothing, you are casting it for free. So you'll basically actually be gaining AP by casting it, because you gain AP on every turn, of course. And this will be her cheapest way of multiple damage cap hits at Chapter 2. After that, you want to follow it up with Lightning Dance, another one of Lune's highest damage skills. This can deal 12 entire hits of pure high lightning damage if you get criticals. Most importantly, it will consume an Earth, Fire and Ice Stain for greatly increased damage, which is part of what makes this skill so powerful damage-wise. And just like with Elemental Genesis, you can and should first cast Elemental Trick, which will generate all the stains to be consumed by Lightning Dance, so that you'll deal 12 hits at maximum damage. Capable of one-shotting even the toughest enemy in the game, just like that on Expert mode. Lastly, we want Stormcaller, another one of her best skills for extreme damage, even party-wide damage. What Stormcaller does, as far as its most powerful property, is that whenever the enemy suffers any attack, no matter if it's a shot, a normal attack, or skill damage with multi-hits, by any ally, including Lune herself, well, that skill or attack will proc a secondary Lightning Strike that will deal damage based on Lune's own damage. And that can also be a critical based on her critical chance, which of course will be maxed. This skill is what essentially makes Lune the strongest damage dealer in Act 2. I mean, she won't do as high damage as Verso, let's say, with my machine gun build for him, but she will be the main enabler of the ultimate damage for all of your party members. Because when you have someone like Verso shooting numerous amounts of times per round, higher than 20, 30, 40 even, and each of these strikes is generating a second strike that will be either at the damage cap or close enough to it, well, you are essentially doubling your damage. Even in Act 3, although the Lightning Strike won't deal as high damage as the actual attack or skill you're using, it is still extra damage, and it does add up quite nicely. But for Act 2, it is the best way of getting damage with Lune, so you begin with, let's say, Stormcaller, follow it up with Electrify or Lightning Dance, and the enemies will just melt, literally. And by the way, as far as the high cost on these skills, you will have a weapon that reduces it later anyways. Now after you finish our Lightning skill set, what you'll want is her ultimate damage skill, Hell. That does cost a lot of points, which is why I'm saving it for last. Ideally, you should only pick this in Act 3, especially because this skill only shines when you can actually break the damage cap. We need Fire Rage, you won't be using it, then we can finally pick Hell at 10 points. Hell will deal very high fire damage for 5 burn per hit at 2 hits, against all enemies. By itself, Hell won't really do much, However, it is when you actually consume these stains that you'll get the maximum damage possible, and once again, you can easily generate the stains needed, well, by going through the same combo as before. Cast Elemental Trick first, and follow it up with Hell for maximum damage, except at this point, you will always have dual turns from the Cheater passive. Even though Hell is very costly at 9 AP, well, at this point you also have enough ways of increasing her AP to the max. Now, just as a quick note, what about other skills for Lune? You don't actually need any of these other skills, especially when you already have, such powerful combos with Mayhem, Elemental Trick, and Genesis even early, but they can still help if you want. For example, her healing skills like Healing Light. This can be picked early, after you get Wildfire. The thing with healing is, it's not necessary at all in this game past the very early game, especially if you're going with my builds. The only truly great thing with healing skills in this game is that you do have some passives like Energizing Heal for lots of AP, also Accelerating Heal for buffing your allies. You also have other buffs that apply on heal automatically, that, well, you can kinda use healing skills as a way of buffing your allies and granting them more AP. It's the same logic for something like Typhoon, which can deal damage and automatically heal your allies. I mean, you can go with it if you want, I just find it unnecessary when you are basically one-shotting, one-turn killing enemies or preventing them to act, even in Act 1. The same logic for Terraquake. This one can increase the break damage and a mistake, but I would much rather just go into Elemental Genesis and your lightning skills or Hell later. Lastly, we have Thermal Transfer. This is actually a very good utility skill for Lune. I just find it unnecessary when you are, dealing so much damage in a few turns. But essentially, Thermal Transfer can be good early game as a way of managing her AP, because if the enemy is burning, she will gain 4 AP by casting this. It costs 2 AP only, and you'll gain 4, so it's a nice benefit. It can also grant her an extra turn at 2 Earth Stains. This part, though, is kinda hard to trigger, because unlike characters like Mael and let's say her Breaking Rules, or CL's Card Weaver ability, well, it's kinda gimmicky and annoying to trigger. Once again, because you deal so much damage with your other skills, I don't think Thermal Transfer is that necessary, but you can go with it if you want. Now let us cover the best stats for our Lune one-shot Stormlord build. Agility, as always, is the best one. You absolutely want to focus into it the earliest. And as usual, 70 agility is enough. You can dump the rest of points into luck for Act 1 and 2. In the case of Lune, it's even better because if she's getting dual turns before an enemy at the start of battle, of course that is how she can get, let's say, her Elemental Genesis combo going even early. If you want her to get maximum critical chance as early as Act 1, be sure to increase your luck slightly so long as you have at least 25% critical chance. For Act 2, however, 50% base criticals will be enough for 100% through passives. Now what about Act 3? The main difference is that then, you can just fully respec into Agility, then Vitality since you'll have enough speed and critical bonuses from equipped gear anyways, and the rest of the points into Might for the maximum damage possible. This is only because the weapon I'll be picking scales the best with Vitality and Agility. But if you go with something else, well, just focus on the best scaling stats for your desired weapon. Might, however, at 99 is always a must-have for the maximum damage in Act 3. Now let's cover the best Act 1 gear and weapon choices for Lune. Trebuchet is by far the best weapon for her at this chapter, because of its unique ability of generating a random elemental stain on free aim shot, which of course means once again, after you fire 4 shots with it, you can easily follow it up with your Mayhem skill, as Mayhem doesn't really care about the types of elemental stains. So long as you have 4, you are dealing the highest damage and breaking the enemy potentially. Of course, once you unlock Elemental Trick, Mayhem won't be as needed anymore. But Trebuchet can still help until around, well, the 2nd chapter. As far as her best Act 1 equipped PICTOS and LUMINA, as always it's all about speed and critical chance. Try to get at least 25% critical chance with her in Act 1, because that is how you'll get, of course, 100% for your Elemental Trick, Synergy and Spammage. That will of course require Critical Burn, followed by Critical Moment. so 25%, base plus 25 from critical burn, then 50 from critical moment, makes it 100% even in Act 1. Speaking about her Lumina, of course critical burn, critical moment, you'll also want augmented aim if you're using the trebuchet weapon, since you are shooting at the enemy and this is extra damage. Now it is also of paramount importance that you go with all the energizing start line of passives, and you can find 1, 2 and 3 in Act 1 still. This way Lune will start battle always with 7 action points, which of course means even on turn 1, you can fire at the enemy 4 times with trebuchet to generate your stains, then follow it up with Mayhem. If you just wanna use Streak plus Genesis instead, then 6 AP is enough, but 7 is kinda good because you know you'll have leftover AP for the next turn, assuming well something survives, which isn't really likely. All of the energizing start feats will cost you some Lumina points. Ideally you wanna feed her some Lumina consumables. But you can of course always equip one of them as a PICTOS, ideally 2 or 3 because they are the costlier ones. Teamwork is also nice for extra damage if you have enough points to spare. The same for Dead Energy if you're using her in normal battles. Now what about Act 2 options for the best weapons? Well, at the beginning you might as well just skip to trebuchet. However, around the middle of Act 2 is when you wanna upgrade it into the Minarim, her main weapon for maximum lightning damage, because of course this is when your lightning spells will start shining. The Minarim first makes all of your lightning skills cost -1 less AP, which is amazing for the point you're at in the game. Especially for combining with Electrify and making it literally cost nothing, but you reduce the cost of powerful skills like Stormcaller and Lightning Dance, all of which are quite costly AP-wise. It then also increases the power of your lightning spells, great, and the benefit of starting battle with 1 Fire Stain is okay at most. Because of course, ideally you wanna go into stuff like Lightning Dance by casting Elemental Trick first, to fully empower it. Act 2 PICTOS is the same logic, speed and critical, and stuff you wanna spare Lumina points for. Speaking about Lumina, Act 2 opens up a lot more damage options, but ideally, you absolutely wanna rush for At Death's Door, then of course Inverted Affinity followed by Critical Moment. These are the core 3 that let you achieve enormous damage and criticals even early. Besides that, it's just a classic damage package, Greater Defenseless, Glass Cannon, followed by Teamwork, also Burn Affinity, and Confident Fighter. Auto Rush is great for extra speed, and since you'll always have Immediate Rest to provide you with shields, Shield Affinity as well. If you have the points to spare, there's some other stuff you can pick, like Teamwork, also the powerful line of talents such as Auto Shell, followed by Powerful on Shell, also Warming Up, and the Greater Powerful talent. But these are all very costly, as you can see. It's, what, 40, 50 points. It's just if you really want Lune to have the ultimate damage possible. Now what about the best Act 3 weapon for Lune? I've tested multiple weapons including Coraline, also the classic Krellin, and well, honestly, Scaverin is the best one by far, for the highest skill damage, because it is Lune's weapon with the highest attack power in the game. And the better your attack power, the better for skill damage. My Lune here, for example, has 14,600 attack power. You won't really be using any of the unique Dark Stain mechanics from Scaverin, it really is here just because you want as maximum skill damage as possible. Other weapons, like Krellin that reduce AP cost, at Act 3 won't matter anymore, you're just blowing things up and you have passives to make up for AP regeneration. As far as Act 3 PICTOS, it's the same logic as before, speed and critical rate, and you can always equip something as to save Lumina points if needed. And as far as Act 3 Luminas, well, it's the same as most of my characters if you really wanna have the best ultimate damage for Lune possible. Cheater, of course, is a must-have, you can pick it earlier if you want, followed by Ultra Powerful, which can only be picked in Act 3. You absolutely want Energy Master because, of course, her most powerful combos require you to cast Elemental Trick first, and you will have an extra turn to the Cheater passive. Don't forget Powerful Shield as well, because you will always have shields through the In Medias Res talent, and of course, your Solidifying talent when combined with Auto Death and Survivor. Now, I know this may seem costly, even though you can easily farm Lumina in Act 3. You don't actually need everything here. Cheater, of course, is essential, but stuff like Teamwork, Warming Up, Survivor, Solidifying, even Energy Master you can kinda survive without, although I wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, you can save a lot of points, if you want. It's just that you won't be as powerful. Now let us cover how to play with our Lune build, starting with Act 1. Well, at the very early game, you won't really have Mayhem yet, so essentially, you're kinda just using your Wildfire ability, as to deal high area of effect damage and make enemies burn. As early as you can get the Trebuchet weapon, however, which is decently early, and of course have unlocked Mayhem, well, ideally you just wanna be shooting your gun at the enemy 4 times to generate 4 different elemental stains, then you follow it up with Mayhem all on the same turn, so long as you have 7 action points, also achievable in Act 1. And don't forget, depending on how high your level is in Act 1, you can also unlock Elemental Genesis just fine. The Yellow Harvest area, for example, has very, well, let's say, fast and easy enemies to grind, if needed. Once you unlock Elemental Genesis, so long as the enemy is not, absorbing one element type, then ideally what you want to do is cast Elemental Trick instead of shooting, and following it up on a second turn with Elemental Genesis. If you are min-maxing speed, and you have the first strike passive, you will always get 2 turns before the enemies get there first, which of course means you don't need extra turns to, let's say, the Cheater passive or whatever, as to, well, properly cast both Elemental Trick and Genesis before the enemies get to act. And this of course blows everything up. Both bosses, and of course, random enemies. But don't forget you need to stack your critical chance for Elemental Trick, and that is very simple. In Act 1, so long as you have 25% criticals, then Critical Moment and the enemy is burning, well, there you go, 100% criticals just like that. For burning the enemy first, that is what my Verso and Gustav builds are for, and I've already posted them. Last but not least, Ice Lance is another very useful skill for debuffing the enemy's speed. Plus, it is very useful when combined with my CL build that should delay the enemy's turn into infinity, thus preventing anything in the game from taking even a single action. So depending on how tough the enemy you're fighting is, there is something to be said about always starting with Ice Lance instead as your first move. After that is when you can do stuff like Elemental Trick or whatever. Now what about Act 2? Well, the logic is kinda the same. Early you're still relying on Elemental Trick followed by Genesis, except once you unlock your lightning spells and start getting more powerful damage passives, most importantly Inverted Affinity followed by At Death's Door and Critical Moment, but also stuff like Glass Cannon and Immaculate, also Shield Affinity. Well, since your lightning spells will be dealing good enough damage enough to hit the damage cap or close enough, that is when instead you'll always want to start with first Stormcaller, to of course essentially double the damage of all allies including Lune herself, followed by either Electrify if you are low on AP since it won't really cost you anything, as you gather enough AP to finally cast Lightning Dance, her strongest skill damage-wise in Act 2 because of all of the multi-hits, each at the damage cap, especially when combined with Stormcaller before for even more hits. So Ice Lance followed by Stormcaller, then either Electrify or Lightning Dance depending on your AP. What about Act 3? It's much simpler. As always, you'll begin with either Stormcaller or Ice Lance depending on what you're fighting, then with the extra turn from the Cheater passive, you'll immediately follow it up with Elemental Trick to generate all the stains you want. Then on the next turn, simply go for Hell. It doesn't have to be Hell, you can also go for, well, Lightning Dance, even Elemental Genesis, but Hell is kinda the best way of dealing consistent super high damage. Second only to Lightning Dance. Genesis is actually the worst one, at least so far in the game. But they all work for, dealing super high damage and one-shotting the toughest enemy in the game. Well, alright friends, so this was it for our Ultimate Lune one-shot Stormlord build. If you found this guide useful, as always, please remember to like, subscribe, and also consider becoming a channel member if you can. I highly appreciate your support. Stay tuned because everyone's favorite Monoko is up next for our last Expedition 33 builds.